Jeff Bearcroft was born in 1922 at a place called Lonavala in India. Lonavala is a hill station about 60 miles east of Bombay, and it used to be quite a busy railway junction. His father was the station master there. He did well at school, not just academically, but also at sport. He was his school's boxing champion. During the Second World War, he volunteered for the Royal Indian Air Force, where he trained as a Hurricane pilot, and he fought in the Burma War. Not long after the war ended, he met Delia. They got married at Calcutta in 1947. By 1950 they had a 2-year-old daughter, Linda, and there was another baby on the way. By this time Jeff was 28 years old and working for Indama Airlines. He was the pilot of a Dakota transport plane. On the morning of the 25th of November, Jeff and his 2 crewmates were killed when their plane crashed into a hillside in Bhutan, near to the Indian border. Air investigation authorities at the time blamed pilot error. The report suggested that all 3 crew had basically nodded off and flown into a hill. Jeff's family were devastated by his death. They didn't know where his remains were. He had no known grave. None of his family ever accepted that it was pilot error. They believed that something must have gone seriously wrong with the plane for Jeff to have crashed it. Delia eventually remarried and the family moved to England. The children, Linda and Tara, grew up with a stepfather. Jeff's accident was never really talked about in the family. The sisters didn't know much about it at all. It was only after their mother's death in 2007 that papers and letters she had kept finally revealed what had happened to Jeff. This was the first time Tara and Linda had learned anything about the accident. As a result of this, they started talking about how fitting it would be to bury their parents' remains together, except that they didn't know where Jeff's remains were. It was Tara, the younger of the 2, who first began searching for the crash site. She hadn't actually been born at the time of her father's death. The search began easily enough, at home on the internet, though eventually she ended up having to trawl through piles of old paper aviation records and maps. She spent over a year searching, but eventually she managed it. Against all the odds, she'd found the spot where her father's plane came down in 1950. It was just over the Indian border, near a village called Katoka in the district of Chukka. In 2008, Tara, along with her husband Herb and Linda, arranged a trip to Bhutan, carrying Delia's ashes with them in a small wooden box. Katoka village is a 5-hour walk from the nearest road, and Tara found walking on the rough tracks hard going. She wasn't really used to that sort of thing. whole point of the trip had only ever been to bury their parents together. It wasn't done in the hope of unearthing anything new about the accident. But there were still 3 people alive in the village who'd seen the crash. In 1950, they'd been aged 8, 12 and 26, but all 3 were adamant about what they'd seen. As the plane had flown overhead, one wing was on fire and the pilot was struggling to gain height. This was completely unexpected news, and a long overdue vindication of what they'd always believed. Nobody had nodded off. The plane was on fire and the crew were fighting to save it. The village put together an escort party who would take Linda, Tara and Herb up the hillside to the crash site. In some places there were tracks, and in others a trail had to be cut, and it would take all day to get there. Tara realised quite early on that she wouldn't be able to complete the walk. The terrain was way too hilly and the going too tough for her. But there was no going back now. A couple of the guys quickly put together a stretcher out of bamboo. Then they put Tara on it, and between them they carried her. There and back. Tara and Linda really had no idea what to expect when they arrived at the site, but both were shocked to discover that the wreckage of Jeff's plane was still there. It had lain undisturbed for nearly 60 years. The villagers hung a prayer flag at the site, and the sisters sang Delia's favourite hymn. They were then led to a small stone cairn in the undergrowth, where Jeff and his crewmates are buried. The villagers had done this themselves in the days after the crash,